intentionally campy in a lot of spots, but that's kind of like, I don't know, you're gonna have to watch the show. It's kind of like part of the show.
All right.
It's like it's a, you'll see. It's cool. I would highly recommend it.
Did I miss anything in the impeachment hearing today?
No. The only thing I think happened officially was that they determined that this impeachment is constitutional.
Duh.
Right. Yeah. It is constitutional.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's been established today.
All right, let's avoid politics in our discussion.
Yeah. We're gonna, I do my best to, I dance around it a little bit. We sometimes talk about politics and sometimes don't. And it's, it's like a sketchy area to navigate.
Is there any news on your mind? Any recent developments?
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to TBN, Tuesday Bro News Day. We've gone through a lot of changes over here on this stream, but what we do now is we unpack the news or sometimes have a very special guest as it relates to the world of vaping, tobacco control, tobacco harm reduction, smoking, nicotine addiction, and the such as. I'm your bad libertarian, freedom-loving host, GrimmGreen. We don't have any Danielle Jones today, unfortunately. She's feeling a little bit under the weather, so if you guys want to send Danielle Jones some love there, she would sure appreciate that. But as you can see, we have a very special guest today. We have Charles Gardner, PhD. Charles and our paths crossed, I believe, on Twitter, and I've been following Charles for quite a long time, but welcome, Charles, to the show. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, thank you, Grimm.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to talk about vaping as it relates to the world of tobacco control and things like that. Charles has a long resume of accomplishments and things like this, and you've been in this space much longer than I have. So run down your resume here. What are your qualifications here, Charles?
No, actually, let me defer to you because you've been in the safer nicotine space much longer than I have.
Okay, well
it's only the past 3 years, and so it's been a very steep learning curve.
It is.
I mean, yes, I am old, and I go back.
Not what I was implying.
25 years in public health, or more specifically, global health, and so and even more, the subset of that, which is global health research.
Okay.
And so, but most of my background it's been on HIV and TB and malaria, water sanitation and hygiene and dengue and rabies and nutrition, child health, and so that gigantic letter P, letter H, letter D, and the
gigantic.
And the intro is in developmental neurobiology. I studied how the brain develops, which actually turns out to be very relevant to nicotine.
Yes.
And in embryos, right? So
fascinating.
How the human brain develops, but of course that was not in. I didn't experiment on human embryos. It was in animal models.
Sure.
So I'm actually also very familiar with the differences and the similarities between what you find in studying a mouse or studying a chicken, in an egg and humans. So then and I worked on the Hill for a little while. So I was for 2 years I was working for a subcommittee in the House of Representatives, and then moved on to the National Institutes of Health, but most of my career then subsequently has been focused on international or global health.
Global health, yeah. Well, it's quite a rap sheet. You have a lot of long list of credentials there. And so you said you got into you do. Don't be modest. Don't be shy. You said you got into like the safer nicotine vape space a few years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, so a little bit more than 15 years ago, I was an associate director for health equity in the Rockefeller Foundation. And in a change of leadership in the health program there, a man named Derek Yack came in as the director of the program. And so he was my boss. And Derek and I got along very well. And we published a paper together on health innovation to help low and middle income countries, which really focused on how paternalistic most of our development efforts are in health, and especially health research when it comes to those poor brown people in those poor countries.
Sure.
And it was really focused on, no, they can invent stuff too, and really the most effective innovation tends to come from the places where the problem is.
Yes.
So strengthening that capacity. So anyway, so we got along because Derek is from South Africa.
Sure.
I'm just a white guy. What do I know? But
Yeah.
it's also, he's just a white guy. But anyway, so we were on the same wavelength there, and we published that with a delightful, intelligent woman named Tara Acharya, who's originally from India.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I left the Rockefeller Foundation. I went on to do other things, including working for the World Health Organization. Eric went on to do other things. And then this extremely controversial foundation was created about 3 years and 3 months ago.
Sure.
I got back in touch with him. So I ended up working there for some time. But at the time, I knew nothing about tobacco control.
Interesting.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I was kind of thrust into this, just kind of picked it up as a cause because I believed in the product so much.
When was that? How long ago was that?
This was, this kind of started when I first started vaping, and I got my first vape in 2009. I was a January, New Year's resolution quitter. I was determined to quit in January, and so I bought a really expensive e-cig from eBay, and it worked pretty good, but I didn't quit, and then it's whatever. I got a few more devices and quit around March of 2009, and then later that year, California announced a statewide vape ban. And it was just one of these things that was, no fanfare, no nothing. It was just a statewide vape ban, and it's going to be voted on. It's going to pass, it's whatever. And so I saw this happen. I went, oh, okay. So I got on YouTube, and you can go find these really old videos of me on YouTube going, I don't know what's happening in California. I think they're trying to ban vapes. We probably need to do something, right, if we want to keep using these in California. And I don't know what we can do. Like, this is pre-CASA, pre-SAFATA, pre-any orgs or anything like that. And so thankfully, we had Governor Arnold at the time, the governor. And
really?
Yeah, he's a cigar enthusiast. And when the bill got to his desk, he vetoed it and said, Californians should be able to enjoy tobacco or nicotine or cigars. We live in a free country. I'm vetoing this legislation. It was like, whew, like I felt this huge sigh of relief, and I thought, wow, this is going to be just the beginning, right? This is going to be an uphill battle for as long as anybody wants to use these products. And so it was really very early on in my introduction to vaping that I knew I was going to have to defend it. Just the feeling I got. I thought, I just saw what happened in California. It was completely out of my control. Luckily, we had a great governor, but it's going to be an uphill battle. And so it's been 12 years of uphill battleness.
That was a good prediction.
Unfortunately, it was a pretty good prediction. And I made some predictions really early on, too, that are kind of coming true when I was talking about how I said in 2010, I said, the FDA isn't ever going to ban vaping. I think they're just going to make it as difficult as possible for you to vape. 10 years later, 12 years later, I feel like that's exactly what's going on right now. Yeah. They won't come out and just ban it, but they are going to make it really difficult for you. And I feel like that's worse. I feel like that's much worse.
Yeah, so I mean,
so that's how long I've been doing this.
You saw things coming, and I have to say I have been really privileged to talk to a lot of serious people from the drug harm reduction field.
Yes.
Over the past few years, like Ethan Nadelman, Alex Wodak, and others, and and Jerry Stimson. I've learned so much from these people.
Yeah.
And one of the things I have had to learn from them is that there's no magic bullet. There's no way to tilt the needle completely in one day. There's no argument you can make.
Yeah.
And instead, it's going to take years of effort.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's going to take, like, look what happened to cannabis.
Yeah.
Right?
We use that example all the time.
All the boomers grew up and they knew it wasn't really that harmful, and now we're legalizing it.
Yeah.
And okay, so, I would hate to think that we have to wait 20 years.
Yeah. How long is it going to take this time?
I mean, actually, I would say, I wish we had the numbers, but I would say probably well over 90% of the people who actually own a device in the United States are adults.
Yeah, easily. I mean,
this is back of the envelope for me. I mean, I have made the calculations, but it's, a Gallup poll or a Gallup-like poll could get this easily. But we don't have it.
We don't have it. Well,
but,
I mean, so I think it was you saying this on Twitter about Big Tobacco. Like, Big Tobacco has these numbers that they could easily release showing what vaping has done to their business, how many vapes they're selling compared to cigarettes, their cigarette production volume. I mean, this is all verifiable, but that's another rabbit hole, which I think is a valid rabbit hole. And I have to defer to a man who is much smarter than me, a guy named David Sweener, on that. And so it's something we've discussed. And so just to segue into that, it is, the tobacco companies are not stupid. No.
They're really smart.
Yes.
They are monitoring market forces all the time. And they have the data. Actually, they have the data from which the market analysts, like at Wells Fargo and what's the other one?
Chase.
The big bank.
Goldman
Sachs. So Goldman Sachs.
There you go.
So that they're getting a lot of their data from the tobacco companies, not all. Every market analyst on earth sees product substitution, and this is economics 101. It's like digital cameras replacing film cameras.
100%.
It's pretty basic stuff.
It's basic and it's verifiable. I mean, and you can see this happening. We talked about this a little bit last week in Massachusetts, how they enacted their flavor ban, and now the surrounding states to Massachusetts are experiencing a tobacco boom because everyone's just going across the border to buy all their flavored cigarettes and vape gear.
That's smuggling for you.
Yeah. Massachusetts is like number 3 in the country right now for cigarette smuggling.
Right. But the thing is, an argument could be made that perhaps the tobacco companies have very, very strong data showing this product substitution going on. Number one. And number two, and this is, I'm going to criticize them, that they don't want to push that data out there. Why? Because it would spook their investors. Why? Because when you produce a cigarette, it costs you pennies and you sell it for dollars. The markup on a tobacco cigarette is enormous.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's unlike any other consumer product on earth.
No, it's the ultimate margin. I mean, they found the ultimate margins.
The margin on an e-cigarette is actually quite low.
Yes.
And these companies they're often selling the devices at lower than it costs to manufacture them. Right? So I mean, they're expecting to make their money on the pods.
On the pods, right.
So it's like making an inkjet printer and making money on the toner.
Right, and selling the printer for nothing.
Selling the printer for nearly nothing.
Yeah.
Or Eastman Kodak pioneered this business strategy in 1910 with a Brownie camera. Produced the camera, sold it for less than it cost to make, and made money developing the film for customers. And every year they produced a Brownie camera that had better features, and every year they lowered the cost. This is what they're doing. And so, but the markup on these safer nicotine products is much less than cigarettes.
Substantially.
So it is going to cannibalize the sale of big tobacco's main cash cow. And
yes.
Here's the thing. People in public health, every one of them should be required to go back to school and take Economics 101 to understand product substitution, supply and demand.
Yeah.
The most basic aspects of what's really going on here.
Yeah.
Because they are all telling us that e-cigarettes are a gateway to smoking.
Right. And I mean, the bummer part of that is none of the evidence shows that. All of it shows product substitution. I mean, nearly all of it shows product substitution.
The evidence shows associations between lots of the adult illegal things that teens do.
Yes.
and this is as you know, this is common liability. So that I would have. It's not politically correct, but the bad kids do bad things, and the bad kids who do one bad thing.
I did bad things when I was a kid.
Other bad things.
Sure.
I did a few things.
I did bad things when I was a kid. I did reckless things when I was a kid. You ever played car tag? You shouldn't, because it's super dangerous. But that's what we did.
Car tag?
Car tag, yeah.
Were you on top of a car?
Okay, so the way car tag works, and nobody play car tag. My friends in high school, I grew up in Lake Tahoe, California, so it's paradise, right? Just alpine lakes and trees, and so all my friends had Jeeps, like old CJ5s and CJ7s with the tops off, because that's you drove around the lake with the top off your Jeep. So the way that it worked is you had a pilot, was a driver, you had your passenger, and then you had a guy in the back with a football. And if you saw another car in the game zone area, which was our neighborhood, late at night, if you threw the football and you hit that car, they had to stop, go get the football, and now they're it. And the other cars go, super dangerous, blowing through stoplights and stop signs. I know. So, yeah, we did some dangerous stuff when we were young. I think that's just part of being young.
I grew up in Michigan. And in the wintertime, it snows there. And so at 16, 17, 18, the thing to do was to take your dad's car out into a big empty parking lot after a snow and make it spin around.
Oh, yeah, donuts.
Completely out of control.
Yeah.
And there are at least 3 times in my life I have thanked God that I did that. Because I know exactly what's going to happen when a car is out of control.
Right. That's true.
Hitting a patch of ice on a bridge.
Yep.
But it's like it becomes instinctual.
Yes.
So everybody should be required to take their dad's car out.
And go do donuts in the snow.
Spin it around.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah,
good.
We used to do that too. And I smoked cigarettes. I started in 7th grade. Peer pressure, just smoking cigarettes.
Very early.
Yeah. Now you are an ex-smoker turned vapor. I mean,
Correct.
Is this something I don't know? Is this something you broadcast? But I've seen you take a few toots, and I know that you vape. Are you comfortable talking about smoking? Yeah,
but I'm a real outlier. I started smoking when I was about 31.
Oh, interesting. What drove you to smoking? Was it like a stressful life situation? I mean, that's usually what I hear.
Broken heart.
Broken heart, yeah. Oh, that'll do it. Oh, that'll do it.
I had a few cigarettes off and on before that, especially in my early 20s. I thought it was cool when I traveled to Mexico, and I traveled around Mexico for a month when I was 23. And there's just a lot of sitting around time when you're waiting for the third class bus to come.
Sure.
With your backpack. And so, then I could just sit there and I could actually look like I was doing something.
Sure.
And
yeah.
So, but I came back and simply stopped smoking because that wasn't a thing I did back in my real life.
Sure.
And then I started smoking at 31, and I stopped about 20 years later.
Oh, that's interesting. I feel like you are very much an outlier. I feel like that's a pretty rare thing.
It is, because most people begin smoking in their actually teens or early teens.
Yeah.
If they're going to be a smoker, they start early.
For me, it was 7th grade, and I believe still to this day that I had a predilection to smoking. No one in my family smoked. None of my parents smoked. My brother didn't smoke. Nobody smoked, but I was fascinated by it. It was one of those things. It's like a little kid being obsessed with dinosaurs or Godzilla or something. I wanted to smoke. I wanted to inhale. I wanted to do it. I just felt this desire, and I felt like I was predisposed to be a smoker, because as soon as I had the chance in 7th grade, I was like, yeah, let's smoke. Smoke it up. Peer pressure. Yeah. Smoke it.
My father smoked 2 packs a day, and there is a lot of data showing that of the intergenerational transmission.
Say, you should be a smoker, right?
Well, yeah, but I used to hide his cigarettes,
mm-hmm.
and he did not find that very funny. But I kind of gave in. But he eventually died of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. About 8 years ago. So I have all of that example to think about. That's a really bad way to go.
That's a really bad way to go. No, that's okay.
It's really bad.
Yeah, that is.
Unless you've seen that happen, you have no idea.
I haven't, and all I've heard, because being in this space now, that's all I'm consumed with. It's like blinders on. I think about smoking, and I hear and cigarettes and people quitting, and I've heard over the years every story imaginable about. I tried to get my dad to switch to vaping, but he couldn't make the switch, and then he died of COPD. And I'm like, it's stories like that are just heartbreaking. And I think the government didn't want your dad vaping anyway. Clearly, the government didn't want your dad vaping anyway. So that kind of
Ricardo Pelosa is one of the top researchers in this field.
Yes, big fan.
Catania in Sicily, and so he had a 3-year study looking at smokers with COPD who made the switch to e-cigarettes, and consistently they had lung improvements.
Yep.
Now they did not improve lung function. They improved quality of life, and they improved a number of measures outside of the official measure of lung function, which might be lung capacity and things like that. I did a kind of crazy survey on Twitter about 1.5 years ago that just asked ex-smokers who vape how long they could hold their breath. because I had come across an article that said the average smoker can only hold their breath for 30 seconds.
Oh, that's interesting.
Vapers can hold their breath on average for a lot longer than that. Personally, I can hold my breath. To be humble, I would say more than 2 minutes, but actually, I got up to 3 minutes when my son asked me how long you can hold your breath. So I guess I have good lung capacity. But I also just did a Twitter survey just a little while ago. Unfortunately, only about 200 respondents, but this was for smokers with COPD.
Okay.
90% of them have seen their health improve.
Yeah.
Seen their COPD symptoms reduce. And more than 60% said reduced dramatically. Symptoms reduced dramatically.
Yeah. I mean, that's a miracle, Charles. That is a miracle, and is a miracle product. I mean, saying miracle kind of downplays it almost a little bit too.
Right, but 99% of the researchers in this business are given grants to find harms.
Well, okay, let's talk about this for a second, because I wrote down finding harms. What is this desire to want to find something wrong with this that's helping so many people? I mean, other than ego or control or something like that, what is this vendetta to find? And recently we saw, brain fog, right? Brain fog. Oh, it might cause brain fog. And I tweeted the other day and I said, smoking causes this, but be afraid of vaping because it might cause brain fog. Definitely be afraid of vaping because it might cause whatever vague thing brain fog is.
Well, I mean, vaping is associated with brain fog because people who have brain fog are more likely to vape.
Yeah, well, and that's
a different issue.
Yes.
The direction of causation is in question here. But the research community, we're talking many hundreds, thousands of people, and you need to understand that most of them started out in their careers as researchers, researching deadly combustible tobacco cigarettes or combustible tobacco.
Yes.
And so, it's one of those, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of thing.
Yep.
But it's also the $713 million that funnel through the FDA. Primarily, they do their own surveys, and some of it goes to the CDC for their surveys, like the National Youth Tobacco Survey.
Right.
But most of it ends up in the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and the National Heart, NHLBI, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And
they just love acronyms, man.
They give out competitive grants. And the researchers who were working on deadly tobacco cigarette research make a quick transition, assuming that e-cigarettes are going to be just the same.
Right.
And so that's one of the problems, but it's only one of the problems. And by the way, they're all training the next generation of tobacco control researchers.
Yeah.
As we speak.
It seems like when they don't find enough harm, they try to double down and try to find some more harm, or they, I feel like everything gets exaggerated,
Perfect example, the most reprehensible example of this that I've seen in the past couple of weeks is from the National Heart Association.
Yeah. What did they say?
So they put out a press release about 3 weeks ago, maybe, based on research that they and their own researchers, they had funded and that their own researchers had conducted. And the research found that biomarkers for heart health in exclusive vapors are indistinguishable from never smokers.
Yes. No, I'm not surprised by this information at all, but how did they spin it?
But what was their headline?
What was it?
The headline was, people who vape and smoke have as much risk as people who smoke.
There it is.
That's the headline. And that was the headline that was, because it's a press release, that was the headline that was repeated in dozens and dozens of articles and papers.
Yep.
But what they were logically saying was, people who vape and juggle live hand grenades,
right,
or kiss cobras,
right,
have as much risk as people who juggle live hand grenades or kiss cobras.
Right.
It's almost a nonsensical thing, but it was a way to find a way to convey a message of harm.
Right.
When in fact they found zero harm. Yes. Zero heart harm.
Yes, they use, and this is something I'm sure you're familiar with Michelle Mitten. She's one of my heroes from the CEI, and she always talked about, like, they use the scariest sounding language that they can. Yeah. They present that in the scariest way possible. We don't get, like, concise data or anything. We get targeted messaging. We get focus group tested messaging. Mm-hmm. And that's I can't stand that. And that's where, this what did you call it? Misinfodemic.
Misinfodemic.
That's where this comes from. I mean, it all starts with how the media types their headlines.
Right. So the scary word addiction tests well in focus groups. So they push that.
Yes.
The brain harms tested really well in focus groups.
Epidemic
tested so there's well. Absolutely no human evidence that nicotine harms developing brains. And remember, I'm a developmental neurobiologist.
Yes. What would you know? You're just a developmental neurobiologist.
There's no human evidence for that, and it's you know, there's just so. Here's the way I look at this, Grimm.
Yeah.
They've erected an intricate house of cards. Each of those cards is a myth.
Yes.
An exaggeration.
Yes.
Or a flat-out lie.
Yes.
And most of the people who believe in that house of cards are not even aware, because they haven't gone back to the foundational research about nicotine's addictiveness, or they will simply ignore the research that doesn't fit their group think.
Yeah, it's like their whole narrative. I mean, and you see other groups do this too, where they constantly will just push whatever weird fringe science, or like that Stanton Glantz retracted study that was talking about heart attacks and how vapors were having heart attacks before they started vaping, and it got retracted. But that's still out there. You know, it gets announced with grandiose, look at this big headline, and then when it needs to get fixed or corrected, it's kind of like a little.
Right.
Don't worry about it. It's, you know.
Yeah, actually, there was a Jonathan Swift quote. Mm-hmm. I forget how it goes now. Basically, basically lies fly out faster than you could think, and the truth comes limping after it,
yes.
and is ignored. But they use that. They actually, there's a deliberate effort going on, and it's based on some sort of a priori idea that safer nicotine products must be an evil plot from big tobacco, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the truth will out eventually.
Yes. I mean, 100%. And I've been saying that for years, is they can't keep running from the science. They try, and they get pretty far, but they can't keep running from it. It just keeps building up, and it just becomes more and more evident of the efficacy of these products. There's going to be like a turning point.
Isn't there a way there's a way on Google to pull up graphs of searches, right?
Sure.
Do I remember that?
Sure.
But
like searched searched phrases and stuff like this.
Is there a way to do that on Twitter?
Not that I have seen. I've seen. Well, I might have to look through my bookmarks, but there was a study done recently on Twitter about language used during EVALI. Someone did a research paper. Did you see this as well? Like during the EVALI thing,
sounds familiar.
They were talking about how the keywords like vaping saves lives was tweeted this many times in relation to this, or this, using the hashtag, it was the THC carts was tweeted this many times.
Yeah, I believe the authors were assuming that everybody who tweeted about that was working for tobacco
or some sort of bot or something in the such as.
But with Google searches, I think there's a way to instantly pull up graphs of how searches have changed over time. And that actually is very instructive. It'd be interesting, and there must be some way to do this on Twitter, because you could look at, I would say last year, the mentions of a teen vaping epidemic.
Nope.
Those mentions were themselves epidemic.
Right.
And they've mysteriously disappeared now.
Yes.
In the past few months. Why? Because teen vaping in the United States anyway dropped 29% between 2019 and March 2020. And there is a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association showing that teen vaping or youth vaping dropped another 32% during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. But what do we hear?
Now, those are not additive. Those are two different surveys. But if you add them up, that's a 52% drop in 2 years.
Sure.
Which is consistent with a fad. It is not consistent with a highly, addictive substance being used. And so suddenly they're not talking about the vaping epidemic much. Although, by the way, I have to say the New York Academy of Sciences is holding a symposium tomorrow on the teen vaping epidemic.
Oh, they use the terminology epidemic.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
But it was probably organized months ago, but they're stuck. But they have all the usual suspects: Bernie Helpem Fisher and Matt Myers.
Oh yeah. Bonnie Fleischer, she's something else. Bonnie, I've never seen someone so against harm reduction as that person.
It's a puzzle.
It's puzzling.
It's a puzzle. Often a chat. Are you losing me?
Yeah, it's okay.
You got me back?
Yeah, you came back.
I often want to just sit down with some of these people and have a polite, evidence-based chat.
Wouldn't that be so delightful?
It would be nice. David Abrams and others at New York University had a meeting about 2 years ago in the fall, where there actually were people from both sides.
Okay.
It's really the first and only time I've seen people from both sides of this debate. Whereas in most of public health, they won't even acknowledge that there is a debate,
right?
A legitimate debate.
Which they're Now, do you think this is like? I mean, the hardest part is changing people's minds, and I find it difficult to change just Dave, the average American's mind about vaping. This uphill battle of trying to change an established scientist or an established doctor who they've been in this, their own trench of tobacco control for so long, changing their minds almost seems impossible.
Yeah, I would hate to think that we have to wait for them to die before
it's
change. But
it almost what it feels like. It almost feels. I mean, obviously the David and Goliath analogy works, but it's like David is us and we're a speck, and Goliath is Bloomberg holding an extra large, extra sugary soda. It's just, it seems overwhelming.
I am often reminded of the debate 400 years ago between people who thought that the Earth does not move.
Yep.
And the moon and the sun and the planets and the stars all go around the Earth.
Yeah.
And then along comes Copernicus and then Galileo but it took more than 100 years for minds to even begin to change.
Yeah. To even be open to the idea of changing.
And in universities in Europe, they didn't begin teaching the heliocentric model until the early 1800s.
Really?
Really.
Wow.
And then we could get into the 1920s and the 1930s and a field of junk science called Lysenkoism in the Soviet Union.
Okay. Never heard of this. This is fascinating.
It rejected evolution.
Oh, okay.
It was like Lamarckian. You have acquired traits. The entire agricultural system of the Soviet Union was based on this, which is one of the reasons that it failed.
Right.
And then there's an even worse field called racial hygiene.
That just sounds like something we shouldn't be talking about to begin with, Charles.
So in the 1920s and 1930s.
Yeah.
Major foundations were supporting research on racial hygiene in the United States. And this was a field of science that said basically some people are better than others. And what we really need to do is to tweak breeding and sterilize people who are not worthy to breed.
Good.
There were peer-reviewed journals. There were scientific meetings. There was a professional society.
Wow.
Humans are capable of that kind of group think, veering off into craziness. And it's a pretty strong accusation for me to make, but I often think of these examples, and I know that we can screw up in these kind of ways. And then I guess the next step would be to say, well, what lessons can you learn for how those junk science fields were debunked?
Mm-hmm.
And there's another one called phrenology from the 19th century.
Was this with the head?
We could measure, the bumps on your head.
I remember that.
There's a bump here for your criminality, and there's a bump for your whatever.
Compassion bump?
Nonsense.
Yeah.
Nonsense. I'm sure your bumps are really nice, though.
Yeah, they are. I have a big compassion bump over here, too. For sure.
So, how, in the end, I would like to speak to historians of science who've looked at those fields to see how were they debunked. But I'm pretty sure what they would tell me is it just took time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took time for minds to change one by one.
Yeah. Well, and
that's actually happening now.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think one of the things that I like to double down on, and I feel like we need to double down on as THR advocates, is two things, like joining the bigger fight of harm reduction as far as like drug harm reduction and things like this, easily associatable and relatable to nicotine vapor products, and teaching people, and I don't know how you do this, teach people just to think critically. I feel like that's where all the wheels fall off the wagon every single time, is people's inability to think critically. And I have one of my heroes, Penn Jillette from the comedy magic duo Penn and Teller.
Yeah, I love them.
I love them. I love Penn Jillette. He's my hero. But when I listened to his podcast when I was really young in my early 20s, he was all about like thinking critically, being skeptical about things, being open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brains fall out. And he taught me like thinking critically is an important thing. And so I try to apply that to what I do and what I read and what I say. But it's hard to have that discussion with someone that isn't thinking critically or thinking bigger picture or being skeptical of something. And so I think
you do a great job of it. And I thank you for everything that you do.
Well, I thank you. I try my best. Thank you for everything you do. I saw, when I posted this on Twitter, people were saying that, well, Charles Gardner, he's the tireless vape advocate, just the most dedicated advocate on Twitter.
Tireless, obsessive, addicted tweeter. Yeah.
Addicted tweeter. But that's good. I mean, and that's what we need. And I've been trying. Do you feel like Twitter is a good platform for advocates to be active on? I've always thought it was, and I've been trying to get people onto Twitter saying like, hey, look, you can tweet right at Mike Bloomberg if you want to.
I think it is, but it has its faults.
Sure.
But I think it's also a way for us to organize ourselves. Mm-hmm. For those of us who have lived experience, I'm a former smoker. I switched to, say, for nicotine alternatives, and I feel much better.
Yeah.
I haven't had a cold or a flu in years. And I can't even, if I had $1 for every time somebody told me that, I would be as wealthy as Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
So.
Maybe.
So there might be some exaggeration there. But it's a way for us to organize, and it helps that process, but it's not the only way. And in the end, we are users, just like a coffee drinker is a caffeine user. We are users, and users have organized in the past, right? And
Definitely.
to their benefit and to their credit. And we need to learn from them and the harm reduction folks, and also folks from the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. People in ACT UP. Because they were in your face, but they were also behind the scenes, measured, and evidence-based. And there were people in ACT UP who marched into Tony Fauci's office and had a sit down. And you know what? He listened to them. Now, you couldn't do that now because the security at the National Institutes of Health after September 11th is sky high. So you can't have a demonstration in front of Building 1 on the NIH campus as they did. And they set up tombstones, and they had smoke billowing out. It was all the people dying of HIV. Well, I don't know what the 2021 version of that is, and I'm not advocating that is the only route forward, but it is one of the routes that we need to think about because they're not listening to us.
I mean, and that's the most frustrating part, is not feeling like you're having your voice heard at all,
No.
And that was one of the things that I really liked about that big first rally that we had in Washington, D.C. was, for the first time ever, I felt like we are organized right now. Look at all of these people. They are all here for the same reason. This is incredible. I mean, I had never seen anything like that, because generally, on the internet, you're trying to motivate people. It's like, do you want to, do this call to action, and you get some people to do it, but you have to like drill it. Like, please do this call to action. Please do this call to action. Please do this call to action. And a lot of it's like burnout and, just getting tired of hearing the same doom and gloom over and over and over and over again. But that rally, that was, I feel like I wish we could have kept that momentum going instead of having that be like the big thing, and then we all got tired after that.
Well, there was a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, there was a pandemic, and we did try to have a second rally that I attended that wasn't the same as the first rally.
No, there were other plans that I think also got postponed because of the pandemic. But that there were probably, what would you say, 3,000 people there?
Yeah, easily 3,000. It felt bigger than that.
It's a start.
Yeah,
it's a start, and it was tempered. It was polite. It was
very tempered.
None of us marched to the Capitol.
Nope.
Or none of us stormed the White House.
Yeah.
And we need to do more of that stuff, and any kind of demonstration, any kind of public display, it can backfire because you can lose sympathy. But on the other hand, I think a lot of journalists saw that rally in DC, and even though it was only 3,000 or 4,000 people, said, "Wow, like what the hell are these people doing? I had no idea. I thought the only people vaping in this country were teenagers."
Right.
Which is, honestly, I think if you surveyed Americans, most of them they believe that.
Probably say the same thing. Well, they probably tell you.
Read the newspapers.
Yeah, they'll tell you that only kids are vaping. They'll tell you that nicotine causes cancer. There are some doctors in the United States that will tell you that nicotine causes cancer. Which, what? I'm not a doctor, but I know that nicotine isn't a carcinogen. That's not rocket surgery.
Yeah, actually, at the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer says very clearly nicotine does not cause cancer.
Yes.
But researchers at Rutgers University published a paper just 2 months ago, a survey of American doctors, and 80% of them believe that nicotine causes cancer, and not only that, but nearly 80% of them believe it causes heart disease and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease.
That's
so we're dealing with that level of misinformation, even among our health professionals. Well, you just kind of throw up your hands, like, what are we to do with that?
Yeah.
And I think going back to that house of cards metaphor that I raised, I think nicotine is the weakest link, or the most fragile card in that house.
Yes.
And I think if we can find ways to pull that one out, it's going to make a difference. It will tilt the needle a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. But it's just, and it's hard. It's just hard. I mean, everything that comes down, everything this comes down to is it's just difficult, because, like you said earlier, you want that thing, that moment that the needle swings in the other direction. You want that big thing. You want whoever the new head of the FDA is, you want that press conference, in the press room where he endorses vaping and talks about harm reduction. Like, you want all this to happen all at once. And one of the hardest things I had to do was years ago realize that that's not coming, and that it's going to be this slow process. And because of this slow process, everybody just gets burnt out and defeated. And even myself, I'm like, I have to take a week off of this, because I can't wake up and look at Twitter and just be mad every day. I don't want to see tweets from the American Cancer Society saying you should not quit smoking with vapes.
Right.
Huge. You should not quit smoking. How do they get away with that? That is actively hurting people. That is actively causing harm to adults that smoke. It's infuriating.
It's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle. Well, okay, so how do we kick at that nicotine card in the house of cards? How do we do that? What do we do?
Well, we could take some lessons from the cannabis fam.
Sure, yeah.
How did they tilt the needle? And it wasn't just that the boomers grew up and started legalizing because they discovered, or they knew from direct personal experience, it's not really that harmful.
Sure.
It was also the pushing of medical cannabis.
Yes. Medical cannabis.
So why aren't we talking about medical nicotine?
I don't know. We should be. It's a very real thing. I mean, it's a pharmaceutical drug. I mean, as far as I know, at NIH, nicotine is.
It is. So, Parkinson's,
yep.
Alzheimer's,
yep.
ADHD,
yep.
schizophrenia, ulcerative colitis, even weight loss, Tourette's.
Yep.
There's a British researcher named Peto, who just finally published the final results of the British doctor study of 30,000 British doctors followed for 60 years. It is possibly the longest longitudinal.
Whoa.
Possibly the longest longitudinal study ever conducted. 30% reduction in Parkinson's disease for smokers.
Really?
And if you then go to research in Sweden, study in 2017, more than 4,000 people who had never smoked, who used snus, 60% reduction in Parkinson's disease.
That's incredible.
And if you go to the animal models, it really looks most plausible that nicotine is the protective element. All right, so Parkinson's is only going to affect 1% of us.
Right.
But you have somewhere between a 30 and a 60% reduction in risk if you are a daily nicotine user.
Yeah, hopefully clean nicotine user.
Probably.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, and that's another thing that I like about science is they put things into reasonable terms. It's like, even when you're reading through the Cochrane database, their analysis, their meta-analysis, they don't speak in like absolute terms. They say there's probable evidence that, they make it very like, I don't know.
Moderate certainty.
Right. Moderate certainty. That's the word I was searching for. They're like, there's moderate certainty, that shows this, that, and the other. And
they're very conservative.
They're very conservative. And I like that in some aspects because it's true and accurate. And then I dislike it in some aspects because then I can't go on Twitter and say, Cochrane Library says that, absolutely, when we know that it is, it's higher than they're saying, but they're being conservative about it, which is, I like that. But I also dislike it because that's playing by the rules and other people don't play by the rules. Stanford can do an anonymous online survey and go, vaping, COVID, vaping, here's the study. We'll put the headlines out.
Right.
That's not playing by the rules. We're playing by the rules. We say moderate certainty evidence.
Right.
Right. It's frustrating. How do we not play by the rules, but also play by the rules?
On the positive side, slowly, an increasing number of people in the tobacco harm reductions research field are tilting toward harm reduction.
Yeah.
Many of them have tilted years ago, and they're just afraid to say it publicly because it could be ostracized or attacked by their own community.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. This is groupthink.
Groupthink.
But the same could have been said for the people who, were starting to think that maybe the Earth does go around the sun.
Right.
And that's happening. But there is also a small community of younger scientists in the tobacco harm reduction space who are actually going back to the foundational research about is nicotine really that addictive?
Right. Yes.
You raised when we were discussing earlier that the 1988 Surgeon General report on tobacco addiction. I'm not going to have the language exactly right, but it basically says the processes by which nicotine may cause addiction are similar to the processes by which heroin and cocaine cause addiction.
Yes. And
this is routinely misquoted as nicotine is as addictive as heroin and cocaine. It's nonsense. It was never what the authors intended.
No.
The Surgeon General, I think it was Coop at the time, himself misquoted this, so that he was then misquoted or quoted actually in the newspapers. It's all BS.
Hogwash.
And hogwash.
Hogwash.
Yes. But I mean, it's dependence forming, probably, like caffeine is too.
Sure.
But so this is a part of why that card in that house of cards is so fragile.
Yeah.
Because if you actually go back to the foundational research, it's nonsense. A rat will press a lever 60 times an hour for cocaine and about 4 times an hour for nicotine and 4 times an hour for saline, which is the control.
Sounds legitimate
it's
to
like,
me.
They're just not really mad for nicotine.
That statement feels like one of those things where they kind of just go, we don't need to, everybody already thinks this. We don't need to correct this. Why would they bother correcting it? It's probably beneficial for everybody. It's probably beneficial for them if everybody thinks that nicotine is as addictive as heroin or cocaine, Why bother correcting that? Why bother the truth?
To discourage smoking.
Right.
It always was.
Always was.
It always was.
Yeah.
But then it becomes like, how in high school textbooks, if they make an error, well, that just gets repeated in the next
edition.
Textbook because they just copy and paste, and it gets repeated over and over and over again. And then, even the lethal dose of nicotine.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It turns out to be basically an error published in 1920.
Yeah, that just
which was itself from some crazy study that one guy did on himself back in 1850. There's no evidence behind it.
Yeah, there's no evidence.
It gets repeated over and over again. That's a perfect example.
Well, and
nicotine is the most fragile,
most fragile card.
Their house of cards.
Yeah, it's easily pushable too, because we've been, not me and you, but we, the royal we, have been studying nicotine for a really long time.
We know a lot about nicotine.
We know a lot about nicotine. So much about nicotine. And now, for the first time, in modern history, which is a weird thing to say, we're trying to grapple with the idea of clean nicotine divorced from tobacco, and nobody knows what to do.
So I think there's an analogy here to psilocybin.
Sure. Psilocybin mushrooms.
I don't use it.
No.
I did a cup twice when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
It's very pleasant, actually, but I don't do it. But it's not, there's no secondhand mushroom.
Nope.
And so it's a user effect, but we couldn't do any research on it for probably 3 decades.
Was this
from the 60s
just because it was illicit?
It was a scheduled drug.
Yeah.
We are only now able to do research on psilocybin, and it turns out it's really, really helpful for people with PTSD.
Yeah. Really,
now, wouldn't it have
helpful.
been nice to know that during the Vietnam War?
Well, sure, but
and
you can't.
Also, it turns out to be extremely effective in helping smokers quit.
I had no idea.
Single-day session with a counselor.
Really? And
basically a guided trip.
Right.
I mean, literally.
Yeah.
And it's about 60% effective for smoking cessation.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is fantastic.
And we would have never known, because it was a scheduled drug for so long, that we couldn't even study it.
We couldn't do research on it. So in the same way, the research that's been done on nicotine's potential health benefits for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Tourette's, schizophrenia, ADHD, ulcerative colitis, even weight loss, it's not being done by people in the tobacco control field. They don't do that because they won't look for benefits. It's being done by neuroscientists and people in the digestive health, field, and none of these people are really, not many of them are really talking to each other. So another tactic here would be to bring together people from those fields that have looked at nicotine's potential health benefits. Yeah. Because the evidence is actually pretty strong.
Yeah.
And get them talking to each other. And then scratching their heads about, wait a minute, so we're all in a room together and we all think we know this now.
Right.
Why do 80% of doctors think that nicotine causes cancer? Like the cognitive dissonance here is just immense.
It's immense, and it's unfortunate that it's immense on that level, because when that gets down to like a population level, like a consumer level, it's just even more confusing. And we get different messages from different outlets or different health orgs, or so many people are so confused these days that I don't blame them in any capacity, because it happens to me too. And you can go on Google and Google, what's the best food to eat with asthma? And it'll say, cheese, dairy, and milk. And you go, what's the worst food to eat with asthma? Avoid cheese and dairy. It's like, well, no wonder people are confused,
Right.
You're getting no.
Yeah, eggs are good for us, and then eggs are bad for us.
Sometimes they're good. Well,
alcohol's bad, and then alcohol is good, and then alcohol is bad again.
Yeah.
No. So public health has lost trust.
Yes.
And
immensely.
It's a damn shame, actually.
Yeah.
And it's stepping outside of the tobacco control field. It is changing the message from one decade to the next is really, people are not stupid.
No.
The public is, in the end, they can be misguided, but they're not stupid.
Yeah. Well, they can be manipulated. You can just, they can be manipulated. It's like, repeating something over and over and over again doesn't necessarily make it true. And when Scott Gottlieb first announced the youth vaping epidemic, I went on YouTube and I was like, prove it. Prove the epidemic, because I don't want to just keep hearing this word without any evidence behind it. Because if you just keep saying it, people will just start believing it, and then you don't need to prove it.
Epidemic tested well in focus groups.
Yeah,
Grimm.
It must have. It must have, because it went over like gangbusters. Everybody jumped on the epidemic.
And here we are. If teen vaping dropped 29% between 2019 and the spring of 2020,
which it did,
and dropped another 32% during the pandemic up to November 2020, which is in the JAMA article, then, and I know those numbers are not additive because they're two different surveys, but if you add them, then you get a level of current use, which is actually lower now than it was in 2015.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is only at least once in the past 30 days. It's mostly experimental. So, like, I often have this emperor's new clothes feeling.
Yes.
Like, I can see the emperor is naked.
Yep, naked as a jaybird.
Why can't they?
Yeah. And it's just because I think we purposefully confuse people. We purposefully confuse people in all areas and aspects of everything. And, even simple things like the asthma diet question, or if you ask people.
That's hysterical, by the way.
It's true. It's a true thing. I saw it happen. If you ask people about anything, a Tesla, someone will say, oh, I heard that's worse in an accident if you have a Tesla. Oh, really? That's worse? Oh, worse. Teslas are worse. Teslas are worse. But really, are Teslas worse? Or did you just hear that Teslas are worse and now you're confused because you're confused on purpose because there's groups of people that want to smear Tesla's name? Everybody gets easily confused by people that shouldn't be confusing them. Right? The World Health Organization shouldn't be confusing people about vaping, but they are. American Heart Association shouldn't be confusing people about vaping, but they are. Like, demonstrably they are. How do we combat that without looking like QAnon people?
Right. I think it's another good example is the American Cancer Society.
Yeah. Because
in 2019, they took a really brave stance, and they actually said e-cigarettes are safer.
Yep, I remember.
Than smoking. All right, and that lasted for about a year and a half.
Yep.
Then, in the middle of the so-called EVALI outbreak, so the fall of 2019.
Yep.
And the middle of the so-called teen vaping epidemic.
Right.
They changed their position and decided their official position was they would no longer recommend e-cigarettes for adult smokers. But they said, if you are an adult vapor, don't go back to smoking.
Right. Yes. Yeah, we brought this up last week, and it's like that's saying that vaping's better for you than smoking without saying that vaping's better for you than smoking. Like it's like the political answer to the question. You dodged it, and you kind of answered it, and you kind of put your own spin on it, all at the same time.
All you have to do is look at what happens in the UK, where the government of the United Kingdom actively promotes e-cigarettes for adult smokers. They have hardly any teen vaping.
Yeah.
The teens they're seeing a barrage of advertisements of basically old farts who look like me vaping.
Yep.
And the teens are going like, I don't want to look like that.
Yeah.
So that's not for them.
Yeah.
And the teens are not smoking, they're not vaping. And here in the United States, we promote moral panic.
Yeah, we love it.
So haven't learned a damn thing
Man, I
from
love it.
Prohibition,
No.
from reefer madness,
No.
from the great
And that-
comic book scare of the 1950s.
Hey, I lived through rock and roll in the 80s, man. I saw Dee Snider from Twisted Sister testifying in front of Congress. Like, I every new thing is going to ruin the youth.
Your very soul was destroyed as a youth.
It was destroyed.
I can actually see it.
Yeah,
I'm looking straight into your soul
by
right
rock
now.
and roll music.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, it took my soul. I sold my soul to the devil because of rock and roll music. But that's the thing. There's always something, right? Always something. Yeah. And as you said before, there's hundreds of products that are for adults only that we somehow manage to, here, show me your ID and I'll give you this. And then that's the deal. That's the deal.
Yeah.
That's the law. That's the deal. There's no, well, this kid got a Juul. Well, then it's Juul's fault. Your kid didn't break the law.
I think somebody smarter than me pointed out that flavored alcohol is a thing that teens should not use, and the solution is age checks.
Yep. Age
and that tobacco cigarettes is something teens should not use, and the solution is age checks. And flavored e-cigarettes is something teens should not use, and the solution is to ban them.
Yes. Makes logical sense.
Was that somebody named GrimmGreen?
That was my favorite tweet. I was really proud of that.
I totally plagiarized you.
You did. You totally. That's okay, though.
Yeah.
Was it you?
Multiple times.
Was it you or what's that other guy I keep seeing on Twitter? Clovis? He's a new guy. I like him. Yeah. I like following him. He's a funny guy.
He's really smart.
Yeah. Very smart, very well spoken, funny, comedic even. So one of the things, I'm just going to praise you for a second, Charles. Every time something comes up in my Twitter feed and it's negative anti-vaping stuff, there's a comment usually from you that's already there. You're like, oh, you beat me there. You already left the comment. I wanted to leave. Here you go. Have a heart, You're always there. You're always on it. You're always there to like help. I like to use the term discredit the myth-making machine. And I feel like you're one of the biggest gears in the machine of discrediting those myths. And I mean, not just on a national scale, but like on a global scale.
Right, but Grimm, I don't want you to give me a pep. I don't want you to give me a pep talk.
No, I just wanted to praise you a little bit.
But let me just raise the question, which should not get you to do that pep talk, which is does it matter? Am I doing anything that actually matters? I think there have been a few instances where I had a polite interaction with somebody and actually they ended up going away and saying, gee, I didn't know that. Thank you for providing that information. It is possible to change people's minds if they're not fixed.
Sure.
But I would say more than 9 times out of 10, you can give people peer-reviewed, published scientific information, from meta-analyses of blah blah blah, and they're like, well, I just don't believe that.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like dealing with. I'm sorry if I piss anybody off. It's like dealing with anti-vaxxers.
Sure. Yeah. No, you won't piss people off. Anti-vaxxers, no. But it is like, in fact, Michelle Mitten, one of my favorite people on earth, I talk about her all the time. She wrote that great paper that was Where Anti-Vapors and Anti-Vaxxers Meet. And it's one of my favorite things I've ever read. One of my favorite things. I'm
going to have to go back and reread that. I remember that.
It's a Michelle Mitten piece, so it's a novel, but it's really good. She's a great writer. She just writes for, long periods of time. But see, so to answer your question, I feel like that is a good thing, and I feel like it's worth it because even if you don't see the effects, even if you leave a comment for the American Heart Association and nobody interacts with you and you don't change any minds, you're still having an effect because it's sort of breaking into their bubble, so to speak. Like we always talk about how we need to get out of the vape space bubble and get to the general public and talk to them. that's, I feel like, where people are going to see it. If there's an American Heart Association tweet and then the first response with the most likes is Charles Gardner saying, the data that this data shows this, that, and the other, I think that's a really beneficial thing, because you instantly are getting two viewpoints. Like, you might have followed the American Heart Association for one reason, but now that you're seeing this tweet that kind of, I don't know, you never know who it's going to impact. You don't know who it's going to inspire. You don't know who it's going to, maybe one person saw one tweet that you did and that inspired them to finally call their senator or something, about a flavor ban. So yeah, I think anywhere you can slide in with facts and science and on Twitter or social media is a good thing.
I would say also, I hope that, and that's kind of the way I think that, okay, maybe somebody will see this.
Yeah.
Somebody will see that this is not the only viewpoint. But more important for me has been, I guess I've been on Twitter for, more than 3 years now. And I've learned. So I've learned from the whole Twitter community, and I've learned about this really complicated space where people are disagreeing about prohibition and tobacco harm reduction and safer nicotine. And it's like this, it's like, I go there because I feel like it taps the pulse. So, for example, I see brain fog was in 3 weeks ago, and now it's gone. Nobody's talking about brain fog.
No.
Then nobody's talking about teen vaping epidemic anymore. No. Really much.
No. They still say, things like alarmingly high numbers, messaging like that.
Still epidemic. Okay, it's just
epidemic adjacent. It's like
at least 29% drop in 1 year, but it's still epidemic.
Right.
So what? It's not even an infectious disease. So in what way is it? The only way that it's like an epidemic is that epidemics eventually end.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Well, and it was a fad. I feel like we know that now, that it was mostly a fad, and it was mostly youths quitting smoking. That's a huge portion of it. I feel like it would be disingenuous to think otherwise, that kids weren't using these to quit smoking, because they definitely were.
Grimm, I was in middle school and high school in the 1970s.
Okay, so fun times,
just to date myself. So 1 year there was a Frisbee fad.
Yeah.
And that was out the next year. And then there was a marbles fad. We all had to get marbles.
Yeah.
We were trading marbles.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year that was out. And the next year there was a skateboard fad. Yeah. And we all got skateboards. Like, begged our parents to pay, the money to get a skateboard. And fads come and go.
Absolutely.
At that age.
Hi, fidget spinners. What did everybody think fidget spinners were going to hang out for a number of years?
Right.
That was a flash in the pan fad. And there was fidget spinners everywhere. I went to Disneyland, and it's like, oh, get your Mickey Mouse fidget spinners, and all these kids in line of all the rides are just sitting there with fidget spinners.
Yeah, fidget spinner sales increased 1,400%. That's alarming.
Yeah, that is alarming. And then the next year, not a fidget spinner to be found anywhere.
Right.
I think it's unfortunate that vaping kind of happened in this internet age. I think if vaping had existed in the 80s, it would have been a different story, or maybe in the 90s, it would have been a different story. But I think with the internet, things escalated so quickly as far as companies just popping up and using whatever advertising and making whatever claims they want.
This sounds wrong, but I blame the teens.
I blame them too.
Because they were advertising to each other. And I remember seeing this on YouTube in the 2018 time frame. And I remember going, oh, shit. Like, shouldn't YouTube shut this down? Because that kid is like 15.
Yeah, that was...
And like, they were advertising. because teens talk to other teens.
Yeah.
And just because it was on YouTube or on a social media platform, I mean, they could have been having the same conversation at school.
Yeah.
But a lot of that gets blamed on the vape companies. But I don't think most of those kids were. I don't think any of those kids were paid social media influencers.
Not a chance. Well, and
so that popped it up. But you know, if you actually look at the numbers in 2013, 2014, teen vaping increased.
Did it?
And by the way, same years, teen smoking plummeted 3 times faster than historical trends.
Yeah.
2015, 2016, teen vaping decreased for whatever reason.
Mystery. And
the decline in teen smoking slowed by half. And then teen vaping increased in 2017 and 18 by a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And that's what sounded the alarms in the FDA and the claim of an epidemic.
Yeah.
And teen vaping plummeted 4 times faster than historical trends in that time.
Yeah. Teen smoking, rather.
Teen smoking plummeted 4 times faster than historical trends.
Yeah. I mean,
and then teen vaping plummeted in 2019 and 2020.
Yep.
And unfortunately, according to the Monitoring the Future survey, teen smoking increased.
Yeah. Teen smoking increased? I mean,
it's almost like cause and effect. It's almost as if these are product substitutes.
Almost. You could look at the data and almost draw that conclusion. Almost draw that conclusion. But I mean, that's verifiable stuff. You can see wherever vaping goes, smoking drops, and wherever vaping leaves, smoking goes back up. This is
right.
demonstrable in so many states. In San Francisco, even they were the first to have a flavor ban, and they were the first state or the first city in the state to see their cigarette sales go back up because of it, as a direct result.
Yeah. Young adult smoking increased quite significantly.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
And basically wherever you've had a flavor ban, smoking, but the data is better on cigarette sales. Cigarette sales have increased. So yeah. Washington State, Rhode Island, Nova Scotia, New York, and what am I forgetting? Basically everywhere where it's been measured.
Yeah.
Shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
Absolutely shocking.
And shocking, this Wall Street Journal article that came out, wonderful piece, and it shows a terrible truth, which is that cigarette sales have strengthened dramatically in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And it pointed the finger in the right direction. Yeah, it was a pandemic. Yeah, everybody's sitting at home and they're worried and frustrated, so they're smoking more. But it was also because e-cigarette taxes had been increased in many states. Yep. Flavors had been banned in many ways in many states. And you know what the article didn't mention was the massive misinformation around EVALI.
EVALI. Well, remember when it first started, they called it VAPI. You remember that? VAPI?
That would have been better.
Then they changed it to
But it really,
EVALI.
There's no T.
Mm-mm.
There's no T in either one of those.
There's no T in either one of those. Well,
in fact,
and that's frustrating. You know, we've been going for a while here. We should probably start wrapping this up.
The
CDC is frustrating. How did the CDC get away with not warning cannabis users that the products that they might be buying could be killing them, but then completely pinned that on flavored nicotine? How did they get away with that?
By March of 2020, fewer THC vapors were aware that bootleg THC vapes were risky than 6 months before that, and more legal nicotine vapors thought that their products might be the cause of the so-called EVALI. It is talk about misinfodemic.
Misinfodemic.
That spread worldwide.
Yeah.
And continues
everywhere.
It's like a massive volcanic explosion where the seismic echo keeps going round and round the world.
Just raining ash all over Australia, all over the Netherlands, all over Ireland, all over, all these places that are implementing or attempting to implement these flavor bans now. And I mean, you see it. Australia is dealing with very similar things. And I feel like this is, like we talked about earlier, it's a very global issue. There's vape or harm reduction orgs in every country. At least I follow as many as I can on Twitter. And it really is like a global thing now. Global thing now.
Absolutely. And everyone should join their local nicotine user organization. In the United States, it's CASA. God bless them.
Yeah, God bless CASA.
Globally, it's INCO.
Yes.
The International Network of Nicotine Consumer Organizations. And on their website, you can find the organization in your country. And some of them are just a few people.
Yeah.
Some of them are quite large and well organized.
Yeah.
The organization in Spain held a demonstration with 20,000 people.
Wow.
20,000 people. I believe it was in Madrid.
Wow.
That's not a small deal.
No, that's nothing to blow your nose at. That's a big deal.
Organize.
Yeah, we can organize.
We have friends in other countries, and there's a lot we can learn from each other. Every country is doing one dipshit policy or another.
100%.
Pardon my French.
Every country is dealing with with the exception of maybe the UK. That's kind of it. Maybe the UK, maybe New Zealand has some positive vapey stuff.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good. But with the exception of those two, it's like every other country has some sort of burdensome restriction on vaping, whether it's superfluous like a 2 ml bottles. Only 2 ml bottles are allowed. What does that? Yeah. What does that do? What does that accomplish? That's a useless rule. But everywhere else has like a pretty burdensome or upcoming burdensome regulations. And I mean,
it's going to get worse before it gets better.
It's going to get worse. I've been saying that for years. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But it is nice to know that we have allies all over the world, that there's advocacy happening all over the world, that there are legitimate, I mean, I hate to use the term legitimate, but scientists and doctors like you mentioned Pelosa and Farsalinos and international doctors and scientists that are on our side, the side of harm reduction in science. And so that's kind of one of those things that helps keep me motivated when it feels like something smaller than David versus something bigger than Goliath.
Yeah, I think it's incremental, and you don't notice it from one month to the next.
No.
But it actually is growing.
Very much. It is. It's growing.
And we will win.
We will win.
We will win.
We will
in
win.
The end.
I do believe that.
It's going to take perseverance, though.
It's going to take perseverance. It's going to take leaving one comment at a time on the American law.
Or just one more tweet.
One more tweet. One tweet at a time. All right. Well,
it's also going to take more evidence.
It is, but thankfully we have that in spades. I'm going to throw some links down in the description to your Twitter is going to be down there, and as well as the and I've used this a lot, that Google Doc that was made up of all the studies.
But Chauncey's Twitter feed is not
yes, that's
public.
right. That's right. We'll change. I'll put other links down in the description as well. But to that Google Doc, was that your curated Google Doc with all of the studies on it?
Yes.
It's like 300 plus studies?
Wait, Google Doc.
It's either a Google Doc or a Google page, or
there's the Safer Nicotine Wiki.
The wiki,
which has been created by other people like I'll get their names wrong, but Alan Baird and others. Richard, what's her name? Anyway.
Don't remember.
Yeah, like fantastic, incredible, great people. Anybody can go in there and add scientific papers and links to those papers and strengthen.
Yes.
It's a wiki.
It's a wiki, yeah.
No, but what I thought you were talking about is the Google Doc that lists about 35 scientific and public health organizations with hyperlinks to their quoted
Yes.
public statements
That
on
too.
this, on the relative safety of e-cigarettes.
Yes, that too.
Yeah,
Yeah. We'll put that down in the description. I'll have some links down in the description. We're going to wrap this up because we've been going way too long, Charles.
Sorry.
We're running long. It's okay. A lot of good information out there. Like I said, thank you guys so much for coming out, hang out, and absorb some high quality information from Charles here. Thank you for taking the time, Charles. I don't want to take up your whole night, but thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Open invite. If you ever feel the need, like you see something on Twitter you're just dying to talk about, hit me up. We can get you on YouTube. And we can talk about it. And we're going to start a GoFundMe for a new laptop for Charles as well. I'm just giving you a hard time. It's still fine. Buy it for life.
Most of the keys are worn away, so I can't even see what the letter is.
That's fine. You just type by sense of smell, It's easy to do.
Hey, thank you so much, Grimm.
My pleasure to have you on. Again, open-ended invite. Appreciate you being here. Everybody else, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. I didn't get any of these super chats, but I want to thank you, Rising Phoenix Vapory, Sexy King Phil, and Freedom Issue. Really appreciate you guys being here, being part of the cause. Remember that an informed vapor is an effective vapor, and get out there and spread the truth butter all over the place. And remember that no matter what anybody tells you, especially people like Mike Bloomberg or the American Medical Association, vaping is at least 95% less harmful for you than burning and inhaling deadly combustible tobacco cigarettes. So no matter what's in your hand, you guys, let's keep on vaping. Be excellent to each other. Peace out, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, let's end this.